Welcome to the Advanced Persistent Security Podcast, where we discuss the world of IT and cybersecurity. Don't be left in the dark about what is going on in the world around you. Here is your host, Joe Gray.
Welcome to the Advanced Persistent Security Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Gray. Today, I've got Advanced Persistent Security partner Matthew Eliason on board. Matthew just passed his CISSP exam and is getting ready to separate from the Navy, looking at possibly moving to Texas, Missouri, or somewhere in the Midwest. Today, we are going to talk about ransomware. Say hello, Matthew.
How's it going?
Matthew is joining us from the state of Hawaii. He is in the Aloha spirit and just had his second baby. Congrats.
Aloha.
With regards to ransomware, what's the biggest concern you have with ransomware?
I think one of the biggest concerns I've seen lately is that people aren't taking it as seriously as it needs to be. One good example recently, and APS logged on this was MedStar Health. They had a bug from 2007 that had not been patched in their JBoss software. Now they said that wasn't the case, and they kind of came out late with the denial. I'm not sure how credible that is, but it'll be seen. Symantec came out saying it wasn't part of the attack, but as we're seeing, regardless of that, they admitted they had a vulnerability in their JBoss software that had not been patched since 2007. So that's pretty concerning. Regardless of all that, they did have a ransomware attack, clogged up a bunch of their data that they couldn't access. There isn't any information on whether or not MedStar Health actually paid the ransom. However, they did, according to ABC News, did reveal that they had data taken hostage. What do you think about data patching and the fact that they had not had a patch loaded on their JBoss software since 2007? I mean, that's 9 years.
That's absolutely crazy considering JBoss runs on Red Hat, which is Linux, which makes automated patching ridiculously easy using cron jobs. And I mean, it's not that hard to run a yum command either or install the RPM yourself. But I want to interject that this is not the first or only hospital that we know of that's been affected by ransomware. We've had Kentucky Methodist, Chino Valley, and Desert Valley, the latter two in California, also affected.
I think MedStar Health is one of the biggest so far, though, right?
I do believe so. And all the cases are being investigated by the FBI. And similarly to MedStar, it doesn't appear as if the other three have paid the ransom, although this comes at an interesting time because I believe it was on the Southern Fried Security podcast, shout out to some more Atlanta security podcasters, that they were talking about the FBI and some of their senior information security agents actually giving the advice that sometimes it is better to pay the ransom than to try to decrypt the ransomware. And I just want to take a little bit of time and go in that direction before we circle back around with actual MedStar and how this could happen and how to prevent it and whatnot. As many of you know, I teach an information security course at a local college, and I polled my students right after we had covered ransomware and asked the question, when, as a security professional, if your organization got infected by ransomware, would you pay the ransom? And out of 28 students, about 20 of them said it wouldn't be ideal, but what it boiled down to was the value of the data, how easy it would be to get the data back, what the cost is if you lose the data.
Right.
That just made my nerdy little heart melt with hope and a bright outlook for the future. The other 8 students really just didn't have an answer. They felt like it was a trick question, and after that explanation was provided, they agreed as well. But what is wild?
Well, I think sorry to interject there, but I think that I guess it depends on how you look at it. I mean, on one hand, you could say that it depends on the situation, depends on the data, whether you have a backup, whether the data is PII or not. But you could look at it on one hand. If you're paying ransoms, you're furthering the problem. You're making it more financially, more of a financial incentive to send this ransomware to attack companies with it than to not. Because if no one's paying it, then they're not going to make any money. But since we know people are, we know people are paying the ransoms. So, just telling you something, it started, the first ransomware was in 2005, 2006 in Russia. right? And since then, it has only skyrocketed. And one of the biggest security threats 2016 that we have noted is going to be ransomware, and it seems like that's coming to fruition. What do you think?
2016 will be the year of ransomware. And I would like to also point out that Hollywood Presbyterian actually did pay to get their files back. They paid $17,000.
Were they the ones that said they didn't tell anyone about it, paid it, and then said they paid it afterwards?
I think they are the ones that tried to keep it quiet. I'm not 100% sure with that. As we're seeing, ransomware attacks are growing exponentially. The thing that I want to point out with this is this. Everybody says, "Oh, don't pay the ransom. Restore from a known good backup." Well, the problem is, how do you know when you were infected? Because ransomware is not something that immediately, as soon as it breaches the perimeter of your network and gets on a system, it may or may not manifest itself immediately. It may take time. It may have a logic bomb built in. It may be Trojanized.
Right. It comes in the form of Trojans a lot of times, right?
Right. I mean, the days of clear-cut malware of you have a virus, you have a worm, you have a rootkit, you have spyware, you have adware, you have a backdoor. Those days are over. Everything now is polymorphic, or what I consider hybrid. That's why companies like Netflix is moving away from traditional AV and going with, quote unquote, next generation antivirus software that's not really software, it's software as a service that allows more real-time detection and analysis. So, I mean, you have that aspect of it. It is sophisticated malware. This is not something that's done by a script kiddie. This is not something you're going to build off by yourself unless you are very skilled. This is not something you're going to write in shell scripting or probably not PowerShell, but it's highly sophisticated.
You made a
good problem. As I was saying, though, to draw back, if you don't know when you were infected and you don't know about the logic bomb portion of it, you don't know when to restore your backups from. Granted, yes, this does create a necessity of having backups. This does create a business case for having things like off-site journaling, remote journaling, off-site backups. But the problem with even with an off-site backup or remote journaling is you may copy that malware over there too. So file integrity monitoring is important. User awareness training is important, which I'm going to get to that in a little bit.
Right. I mean, you made a good point that this antivirus software we have today and is not effective against ransomware in most cases. And even Symantec was the lead cybersecurity company and sponsor for MedStar Health, and they still had the same issue. So we're seeing antivirus software is just not working. The traditional isn't working, and we have to evolve. Target keeps moving. Everyone else is staying static, and that's why we see ransomware just skyrocketing. Nobody's evolving with it. Nobody is adjusting to it. We just keep seeing them over and over again.
Well, and that's because they're not attacking the technical means. The problem with antivirus is it's taking a non-technical problem and trying to solve it with technical means. When we are selling social engineering and phishing awareness training, the biggest thing is no amount of money that you throw at technology will train your users. You can throw $500,000, you could throw $5,000, you can throw $5 million at your security program buying technical things, but that's not going to stop your users. And that's why ransomware is so effective, because of those hybrid campaigns.
Right. I think I have one more question, and you might be able to answer it. And many people have been probably asked this question, is that, let's say your data is encrypted by a ransomware program by hackers. Even if you pay the ransom, what's going to stop them from copying these files anyways and still selling them?
Absolutely nothing.
I think that's my biggest thing about actually paying, is that there's literally the only type of thing that you'd want back would be NP. The only thing you'd want back would be PII, but if they already have it, you're paying them money and they're just going to keep it.
Well, there's that, but at the same time, I mean, nothing's going to ensure that they are not going to sell it.
Right.
Nothing is going to ensure that if you pay the ransom that they're actually going to decrypt it for you. That's just a shot you're taking in the wind. But more often than not, these are criminal syndicates, and in those cases, they usually, from what I've been reading, they do take they actually hold good to their word. So that should be a little bit comforting and reaffirming, although it should still scare the living daylights out of you as well.
Right.
With that, another thing, though, is what I would do if I were in an organization and we had to pay the ransom to get the ransomware off. If I paid that ransom to get it, the first thing I would do is encrypt my files. I would encrypt every file at rest that I could, so that, and this is actually a good mitigation for ransomware that people seem to be forgetting right now.
Full disk encryption?
Exactly. Well, just encrypting data at rest. I mean, it depends on if you want to do a stream cipher or a block cipher and how you want to implement it. And then you have to worry about things like the key exchange, public key infrastructure, symmetric cryptography, etc.
But it makes it a much harder target.
But it makes it a much more useless target.
Right.
Because if they're getting encrypted data, if they're encrypting encrypted data, they've just made your data more secure. Yes, they've made it non-usable, but it's useless to them as well. They can run their cryptography, their cryptanalysis tools against it, but if you use something like 256-bit AES, they can only really simplify it down to 192, to the best of my knowledge, and even then, they're not going to break that without brute force. And, I mean, to go to the decades-long debate about passwords, if you give anything that's encrypted or stored with a password enough time and the attackers enough time to break it, they will. By that time, what value is it? It's just like a password. That's why you change your password every 30, 60, 90 days, because it's not if someone can crack your password, it's when. It's how much processing power and resources they have to throw at it. So in that specific scenario, if you encrypt it using strong encryption, it's going to take them a lot longer, and they're going to move for that low-hanging fruit. They're not after ultra secure environments. They're after the low-hanging fruit. And the reason they're after hospitals is because, you know, a lot of people go into hospitals, they'll connect any device to the network so that they can wait in the waiting area while they're with their loved ones or whatever. There's a plethora of billing data. There's a plethora of personal information, of healthcare information, and you can steal someone's credit card and they can get a new credit card. You can steal someone's identity and they're not getting a new identity, period.
There's nothing that holds more personal information than health systems.
Unfortunately, that's correct. And I mean, a lot of times, speaking from some experience I have in talking to some colleagues, when I was at a residency for my doctorate program, I was talking to some people who worked in the healthcare industry, and basically they were saying that if a doctor asks for something, they get it. There's very little pushback, and basically regulatory compliance does not apply to doctors, is the thought process that a lot of medical facilities have, which this is something I would actually like to discuss with Martin from the Southern Fried Security podcast, considering that he is in the healthcare industry. But, you know, from two outsiders from the defense sector looking in, that definitely makes sense, because I know when I was in the military, and you can attest to this now, if the captain asked for something, he got it.
Right, and MedStar is a good example. They had their JBoss software, probably wasn't working correctly if they had installed the update, or they just didn't want to change it. One way or the other, the doctors there got what they wanted. You know,
exactly.
The boss always gets what he wants, and you take risk based on that. And a lot of times they're not mitigated.
Well, it also could be that whole, this is mission critical software, and we put it together using duct tape and a prayer to begin with, and in order to upgrade it, we're going to have to go through all these steps, and it's probably going to break something, so it's cheaper to leave it as is, unpatched, and we ignore the risk.
I see this so many times. A lot of people don't understand what they're accepting when they accept that risk, when they don't patch the system, because when the patch breaks something on there that's quote-unquote mission critical and they don't have another way to do it, so they're like, okay, well, we'll just accept that risk because it's mission critical, but they don't understand what the risk is in the first place. If they're leaving on a complete port open that just says, hi, everybody, come on into my system because we need to be able to get this mission completed, what is the risk there? Has it been analyzed? Is it mitigated? Is it accepted? You don't know. We're just going to get the mission done.
I'll give you a great example of that. You should know this yourself, actually. Some of the ships in the Navy, specifically the surface ships, are still using Windows XP.
I can attest to some systems still using Windows 2000.
So there you have it. And I guarantee you they are, quote-unquote, mission critical.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I'm going to give a cheap plug to my favorite operating system right now. And if you had Linux, you wouldn't have this problem. You would just have to make sure your architecture was correct and update your libraries, and you would have a lot of your problems solved. And make sure you use long-term support software such as like Ubuntu 14.04 or Red Hat Enterprise Linux at that.
I think a recent study showed that Windows XP was the third most popular operating system in the world still, and it's not even supported by Microsoft for updates, vulnerabilities, anything. Windows 7 is about to lose support here pretty soon as well, from what I heard.
That's correct. I believe we have 3 years for extended support.
3 years? Okay.
It doesn't surprise me that Windows XP is one of the most popular. I would say Windows 7 is probably in the top 3 as well.
It is, yeah.
And for the third one, I'm going to probably assume I wish I could say it was Mac, but I'm going to go with just a generic Linux flavor. If I had to get specific, I would say either Fedora or Ubuntu. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss more in depth the mitigations for ransomware.
Are you looking for a place to advertise to the unique audience of IT security professionals and enthusiasts? Look no further. Advanced Persistent Security is seeking sponsors. This slot could be yours. Contact sales at advancedpersistentsecurity.net for more information.
Thanks for sticking around through the break. We're back. It's Joe Gray here with partner of Advanced Persistent Security, Matthew Eliason. We're talking about ransomware. So we've kind of moved away from explaining some of the infections of ransomware and the cultural reasons why. Now we're really going to get more in depth as to why and how to prevent it, specifically how Advanced Persistent Security can help you in the prevention of it, and other mitigating factors that could certainly help reduce the threat of ransomware. So, first and foremost, Matthew, what do you think is a major way that ransomware makes its way in? I think we've already kind of touched on this earlier, but let's get a little bit deeper.
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
So, Matthew, we've already kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. What, in your opinion, is the leading cause or causes of ransomware infections?
One of the leading causes, I think, is not having, at least at this point, not having an effective security solution for the ransomware threat, whether it be, because a lot of times they're coming in as Trojans, they're not being detected, they're encrypting the data, you don't know when it starts, like we said earlier, and then you don't know where to restore backups from, and then people are paying. So I think one of the biggest problems is that we don't have a security solution for them, hence why everyone is getting attacked by them. 2014 to 2015, there was somewhere around $18 million stolen in data from CryptoWall. So it's just showing there's an effective solution, and then we're turning around and we're paying for the data to get it back.
Okay.
It's just a rotating wall, in my opinion.
And I think you're going down the right path on that. Because, I mean, it's not hard for someone to get their hands on CryptoLocker, CryptoWall, or another one called Locky, Or
Locky, that's right. You can download them right now.
Exactly. Or PETYA. That's another one. I think I pronounced that correctly. It's PETYA. Either way, that's the one that locks your master boot record. That one's the ugliest of ugly. Basically, you get a blue screen of death, and when you reboot the machine, it gives you a red screen of terror with a Jolly Roger that basically provides directions on how to pay, how to download Tor, how to get Bitcoin, and how to pay them. And then they give you the key, you're good. So because those are so accessible, I mean, in the past you were able to say, oh, well, it's all coming from this part of the world, or it's all targeting this part of the world. So you were able to enforce geolocation-based defenses.
Right. It started in Russia. It started in Russia.
Well, a lot of malware starts in Russia. So, I mean, a lot of bad things, like in the cyber world, start in Russia. A lot of cyber attacks emanate from China. I mean, a lot of cyber attacks emanate from the United States as well. But nonetheless, the point being, it's so easy to get that software. Anyone can build it, and it makes defending that aspect of it hard. And because it's easy to get the wrapper to build it with, no two are the same, so that makes the signature-based detection incredibly difficult. But most of the time, the vector of entry, it's not some wily hacker that finds some mysterious open port and is able to just drop off the file. That's almost never the case. Drive-by downloads, watering hole attacks, I wouldn't call that, I wouldn't rate that as critical. The main source of infection, in my opinion, is actually social engineering and phishing. So ultimately, that's why you need to invest in a social engineering and phishing awareness program, because your users need to understand what phishing is, what phishing looks like, how it's perpetrated, what indicators they should look at. For example, with American businesses, when you receive emails, teach them how to look at their email header, scrutinize the emails for words like favorite or rumor that are spelled O-U-R as opposed to O-R. Look for organization with an S instead of a Z. I mean, you can have a Bayesian filter which will do the same thing, but it's only so good.
You're talking about authenticating inbound email, protecting the email servers, which is a huge threat from.
I'm not even referring to email
right?
in general. I'm referring to train your users. I'm not even referring anything to the technical aspects of email whatsoever. I'm not even talking technical in any sense.
Okay, so you're just talking about from the user aspect and saying, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what to stay away from. The training does that.
Exactly.
And even a non-technical perspective.
Because your technology will fail. Your technology will fail to catch it, and your people are the front line. Generally speaking, technology really does not fail in the regard of technology does what it's supposed to do. It produces ones and zeros, pulses, and whatnot on the line. The only time you really have a failure is due to a human misconfiguration or old age or freak accident. But with regards to it, people are exploiting other people. They're sending those spam messages, the spam instant messages, or the equivalent of text messages, spam texts, and they're getting people to click these links, and because they're clicking the link, they're infecting them with malware that way. Or they're redirecting them to malicious websites to download malicious software. For example, my boss received an email from Copier at the organization where I work by day, to which I'm not going to mention. He called me frantically saying that we had been penetrated. So I took a look at the email header, and it was spoofed. It came from Qatar. And ironically enough, I looked up the model of Canon printer that we allegedly have, which we don't use Canon, and that model really does not exist, and the only thing that popped up in Google search results was Russian websites. So it appears as if that was a social engineering payload, presumably from Social Engineer Toolkit, with a Russian-written payload. So, I mean, the average user would have opened that file because the file said urgent open attachment, which was out of the ordinary because when the copier emails us, it has a distinct subject. So in doing so, I've moved the file over to an isolated virtual machine so that I could analyze it. And when I unzipped the file, it was actually a JavaScript file, and when I decoded it, it was actually trying to redirect you to a website that would automatically execute a Windows executable file.
Cool.
So for the non-aware user, that could have delivered ransomware. It honestly could have. It could have delivered anything. But because we had an awareness program in place, it stopped it.
Right. So you're saying that even if we authenticate inbound email, things are going to get through. Even if you're protecting your email servers, even if you have ad blocking, for example, is a big thing. Even if you have all those things running, the fact is you can't stop everything. And your users need to be trained.
Even the smallest grain of salt can make it through a sieve. So it's like I said earlier, you can throw as much money as you want at technology. At some point, it's still going to fail, and the wily hacker is going to get around it. Your antivirus cannot detect human emotion and the various motivations that people have for clicking links, the ignorance, the greed, the trying to, I'm going to get rich, the compassion, the like and share and comment for prayers, the obviously the perverse, the click here for some pornographic image, and don't even get me started on the amount of malware that comes from pornography. When you can manipulate that, and you can manipulate people, you found your way in. And in training users to still have those feelings but isolate them and not act upon them, that's key. And the big thing that a lot of social engineering and phishing awareness programs is missing, they try to go on the internet and download some one-size-fits-all approach when that's not necessarily the case. One thing that you should definitely have in your awareness program's arsenal, something that we heavily advocate whenever we're designing programs for clients, that is you customize it for your organization. You have the policy-specific actions that are unique to your organization in your training. You remove all uncertainty and all doubt. All users, any user that does that training, at the end of the training should know exactly what management wants them to do when they receive a phishing email, whether that be forward the email as just a regular email forward it as an attachment, change the subject line, delete it, block the user, what? But you've got to make that clear. The one thing that organizations really need to do, and something that we heavily advocate when we're designing social engineering and phishing awareness training for clients, is that we customize the training for your organization. We take your organization's policies and we put them in the training. We make it to where your users have no uncertainty, no doubt what is expected of them. If they receive a phishing email or phone call, they know exactly who to report it to, what to put in the subject line, how to forward it, be it forward the attachment or forward it just a regular email forward, and what to do. More importantly, your users need to know what to do whenever they accidentally click it, what they do when they fall victim, because it makes the incident response so much easier when you actually know what you're looking at. When the user tells you, hey, I accidentally clicked on this, it took me to this website, you can look at the logs and see, and you can start to trace things. That makes it a lot easier than saying, oh, we got infected, how did it happen?
Right, a lot of people don't get training on what do I do, or what do I do if I click the link, if I do fall victim, like you said. Training doesn't usually cover that, but ours is.
Right, and I just finished the SANS Security 504 training for instant handling, and I can say, based on what I learned in instant handling training, that in itself is invaluable. It drastically reduces the response time. It makes the containment effort so much easier. The eradication portion is a little bit better because you know exactly what to isolate, and then obviously restoration is pretty easy from there as well. So in summation, I mean, will training solve every single problem you have with ransomware, social engineering, etc.? No. There's no such thing as 100%. There's no such thing as 0%. Just like there's no such thing as a random number. But Can a small investment like training enhance your opportunity for success? Yes, especially if you incentivize it for your employees. If they catch a phishing email, you give them 10 minutes off and let them accumulate time catching these emails until they have an hour or so off. If you run tests using something like phishing as a service, if they catch it, you give them a T-shirt. If they thwart an attack, you give them a parking spot, something. If you incentivize it for your employees or make a game out of it, they will compete. I mean, it's very little investment for the company. The company may or may not be paying for the phishing as a service, and the company is paying for the training, design, and delivery. But when you're talking training, design, and delivery being at the fraction of the cost of, say, an intrusion detection system that will not catch it, I mean, it's a good investment, especially when you're looking at how many users your organization has and how much you would be paying out to get your stuff back in the event of ransomware. But to circle back to other mitigating factors we talked about, file integrity checking is also important, as is full disk encryption when plausible. Most regulatory compliance requires it for their subject information. So PHI pretty much has to be encrypted. PCI data needs to be encrypted. Sensitive military data needs to be encrypted. And, I mean, it's just a general best practice. I understand that small businesses may not have the time, the knowledge, or the infrastructure to do it, and that's something Advanced Persistent Security can easily help them with. Exactly. That's the whole mission of Advanced Persistent Security, the fact that small businesses can't afford to go out and buy the $50,000 intrusion detection systems, the $50,000 vulnerability management and SIM systems. That's where we come into play, and we help them come up with solutions that are a fraction of the cost but actually provide them some level of security. Is it necessarily the same as Bank of America or NSA? No. But as a small business, do they necessarily need that? Maybe not. Maybe they do. It all depends on what they do as a small business. Just take a look at the best practices. And I mean, if anyone has any doubt about best practices, we would be more than willing to go over the Center for Internet Security /SANS Top 20 Critical Security Controls, or the Open Source Web Application Security Project, OWASP, Top 10 Security Controls with you at any time. We can help you come up with something from the NIST Risk Management Framework. We can write the policy. If you have existing policy, we can revise it. Or we could just review your policy and find any tabletop deficiencies you may have.
What would you say to a small business that doesn't see the need because they've never been attacked?
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to provide final thoughts and advice to small businesses.
Are you subscribed to this podcast? If not, please do so on iTunes and at advancedpersistentsecurity.net/podcast.
Don't forget to check out our blog at advancedpersistentsecurity.net/blog. Follow us on Twitter at ADVPersistentSEC and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/advancedpersistentsecurity.
Thanks for sticking around through that final break. I'm still here with Matthew Eliason. We are going to talk about our final thoughts in regards to this. Sum up ransomware. We're going to provide a plug for our blog, and then we will see you soon. You had a question right as we were finishing the previous section. What was that question, Matthew?
Well, my question was, and this might ring true for some people listening to podcasts, maybe not, maybe they know somebody that has said this before, and they don't take cybersecurity seriously. As the president, the CEO of Advanced Persistent Security, what would you say to a small business that says, I've never been attacked, why do I need to spend money on this?
Well, that's an excellent question, because about 2 in 3 small businesses get cyber attacked every year. So that's 66%. Of that, 40% of those businesses go under in less than 2 years. So it's not necessarily if you get attacked, it could be when you get attacked. And with that, you owe it to any customers you have to provide that service. if you're storing their data, you owe it to them. You may be subject to regulatory compliance, and you may be trying to bid for that one specific contract, that one specific job that you really want, and they may require you to have some sort of security architecture. Don't let that deter you. Contact Advanced Persistent Security. We can help you with that. We can help you with a policy perspective and with some of the technical aspects as well. So, in summation with ransomware, basically it's malware that finds its way into your system, typically via phishing or social engineering. It could be that rogue thumb drive that makes its way in like Stuxnet did. It then encrypts all of your files or specific files and prompts the owner of the infected data to pay them to regain access. At that point, the person either pays it or they don't. If they don't pay it and they try to remediate it themselves, they may never get that data back. Some senior FBI agents have even said, you may want to pay the ransom. So other things we talked about were examples such as the 4 infected hospitals, one of which has paid $17,000. We talked about mitigating factors and what we could do for small business. Matthew, do you have any final pieces of advice for listeners?
Yes, I think that we've gotten into a place recently, and ransomware has shown that, is that we've been reactive versus proactive. With ransomware, you have to be on top of it. You have to be training your users. You have to be protecting your email, authenticating email headers, IP addresses. You've got to be on top of it. Like what Joe said earlier, Advanced Persistent Security offers user training, and your users are the first line of defense against one of the biggest threats in the cybersecurity field in ransomware. That's it.
Sounds good. So that's going to be it for now, folks. Stay tuned. We've got some pretty amazing guests coming up on our roster. We've got 2 confirmed and 1 almost confirmed guest. I'm going to keep them anonymous until after we record it. So if you like this, give us 5 stars on iTunes. Love us on iTunes. We are also on Google Play, so like us there. We're on Spreaker, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Show us love wherever you hear us. Don't forget, we have advancedpersistentsecurity.net, and we also have a blog that occurs anywhere between 1 and 5 times weekly at advancedpersistentsecurity.net/blog. We also offer user awareness and social engineering training. We help you design your own awareness program if necessary. We write policy, revise policy, and review policy. We can help you with your best practices, regulatory compliance, or meeting the requirements of your vendors or customers. So until next time, stay secure.
Thank you for listening to the Advanced Persistent Security Podcast. Until next time, stay secure, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast.